Greetings! This is the latest episode of the Vernon Richard Show. Yes, we're in the same outfits because we did a batch recording situation. And this one is where we attempt to answer some questions that were submitted to one of our listeners, Emily O'Connor. Quick challenge, pop quiz, you'll find out in a few minutes. Emily gave us about 19, 20 odd questions. How many questions do you think we managed to get through in the podcast? But we cover a few topics.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
I'll say, we chose the topic of career journey, and there was only 4 questions in that topic. We got through 2 of them. It's not bad.
True. Oh, spoiler, man. You told me. Anyway. Enjoy the show. We cover
Enjoy.
a lot of topics. We talk about positioning. We talk about job titles. We talk about consulting, job crafting, how all these things tie into the role and how we've experienced them in our career. So enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Vernon Richard Show. The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that we're wearing the exact same clothes. It's because we've fallen a little bit behind, and we're trying to play catch-up by having a Sunday morning recording session. We thought about changing T-shirts, to trick you all into thinking it's a different day. But it's not. It's the same day. And we're just spending some quality time together.
If you remember... quality time, Rich. If you remember the ethos of the podcast, it's very much we're going for the minimum viable podcast still a little bit at the moment. We are trying to improve things in 2025, but yeah, changing outfits was deemed to be too much effort, and we couldn't be bothered. So just gonna go back-to-back episodes.
But that ties nicely into today's topic. So me and Vernon are on a podcast hosting, producing journey, and that's obviously coming with observations, as you've just heard, and challenges. But most of us, we're here, it's kind of like a fork off our actual career journey, right? Like we're doing this off the back of our actual career journey. And so we thought today we're going to talk kind of about, career journeys. What is a career, continuous learning, the kind of things that go into having a successful career in the software testing space. And this was a topic requested by Emily O'Connor, who, if the PeersCon episode is out by now, you will know we bumped into at PeersCon and hit on the topic of, by the way, you can send us questions and topics. That's perfectly fine, which, as Vernon mentioned to me, that's a dangerous thing to do with Emily. And she proceeded on the train journey an hour later to send us over 22 questions, which is absolutely fantastic. And that became the reason why this has happened, though, is because me and Vern, sometimes we're a bit indecisive. We sit there discussing for ages about what to talk about.
We've said before, you only hear a percentage of the conversation that we talk for hours. Quick tangent. I just, in between recording the other episode and this one, I went into the kitchen where my wife is busy sorting some stuff out. She was like, when did you start talking to Rich? Have you been talking to him for an hour? And I was like, it's actually been 2 hours.
But we did say, and we've said it on the pod a few times, any topics, any questions you have, you would love to see me and Vernon discuss and dig into our vast experiences, please ping them our way. Emily took advantage of that, and now we're discussing some of her topics. So, I'm going to go down the list. Emily kind of grouped these for us, which is really kind, but career journey was the overarching frame.
So, what's in a name? I saw a role as a test engineer, but it sounds to me like the team would expect the person in that role to be doing the role of a developer advocate, since the team is already writing their own APIs and end-to-end tests. So the question is, how much focus do we need to put into the job title if you're considering taking on a role like that?
What a topic, right? This has come up before, right? We can't start this conversation without saying there's a talk by Martin Hinier where he experimented with changing his team's job title, and the level of respect and engagement that they got when I think they went from test team to R&D or something.
That was one of them for sure.
Yeah, that was one of them.
There was loads of them. He went crazy.
Yeah, the conclusion is it makes a significant difference. But I think it might be worth just digging into some of the reasons why it might make a difference. So would I say, should you be put off? No. I think it's a great opportunity to look at the job spec and look at some of the finer details in there, but also use it to frame a whole bunch of questions for when you get, if you do get that interview, because that's your opportunity to say, you're almost framing your experiences by saying, well, to me, a test engineer is A, but you're looking for B, which shows that you've read the spec and looked at their context. And then you can be like, well, in your domain, C, where you've now looked at the company's domain, it looks like I'd actually be needing to do A, B, C, D, and E. Therefore, I think, the title would, you don't even have to go into the title, but that would now give you a conversation for them to go, actually, you've just described exactly who we're looking for and what we need. We just happen to label it test engineer. But the label ain't going to get you the job. The showing that you can help them with their problems is going to get you the job. And also help you frame your job description for when you do get into that company. And I think that's, while titles might make a difference on CVs and maybe future careers or future roles in the company, I think with your manager at least, it's better to talk about your responsibilities, your goals, kind of where you're moving towards. But no, I can't ignore the fact there will be a stigma with some other people in the company, other roles might look at that job title and, make assumptions and set expectations already, which is something you will also have to deal with. So yeah, I kind of split off tangent there, but yeah, what do you think then?
I'm looking off to my other screen because so many thoughts and ideas and references were springing up to mind. So for me, and I've talked about this before, so ring that I've talked about this before, Bell. I think there is a lot to be said about the name. For me, why this is important is because it helps set people's expectations about what they should expect from you. And sometimes that can be good for you, and sometimes that can be bad for you. Sometimes it can be helpful for you, it can be unhelpful in other situations. So I think it's something that you need to be very deliberate about and very explicit about. Understand, what does that role mean to me? What does it mean, the name I'm talking about of the role? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to the people that I'll be working with more closely? What does it mean to the people who are decision makers in the organization? So the people who are going to be integral to my career path, the people who will be integral to my remuneration, these kind of things. This all comes back to positioning. I've talked about this before, and I'm going to talk about it some more in the coming months ahead. I've got a few conference talks coming up where this is going to feature. And the positioning is absolutely important. How you position yourself with your teammates, with your colleagues, line managers, direct reports, everybody can really have a large impact in your success or not, or otherwise, or difficulty onboarding and all of that kind of thing. So I would put I'd put quite a lot of time and effort into this and do, some of the work that Rich talked about, which is as you're going through, if you're going through an onboarding or an interviewing, kind of saying, okay, here's how I see the role. The context to me looks like this. And based on these aspects of the context, I think I'm going to be doing A, B, and C. That's what I'm going to be doing. And the more you can have that conversation, the better. But it's also important that if you're taking on a role like this, you need to, I say need to, you can think that you've had this conversation, but you haven't.
Yeah.
And so bear that in mind. Or another way this can manifest itself is you can have the conversation, but it turns out that the person or people that you're talking to haven't had the conversations that they need to have in order to position you properly. So I guess a shorter way of saying that is, this is not like a one-time thing. I think you'll have to iterate on it because people's opinions will change and evolve as they work with you, and you will constantly have to remind people, okay, this is what you should expect of me now. This is now what I expect of you. It's not just a one-way demand situation. It's not like people have expectations of you and you don't have expectations of anyone else. It's like, no, you also have legitimate needs and requests and expectations and demands of your peers and your colleagues and your teammates. So I think the naming thing is absolutely, it can make or break the role. It can certainly make or break your happiness in the role if it turns out the job you thought you were taking on isn't the job that was actually on offer. That
Yeah.
can be a miserable place to be. So do what you can to avoid that, I would say.
Yeah, I've just written some notes as you were talking. I'm trying to think of a timeline for this. So I think when you join a job early on, right, the only thing people really know about you is, hey, you're Richard and you're a test engineer and you've been added on to Team B, right? That's all they've got because they don't know Richard. They don't know who you are. They don't know what skills you got. They don't know your personality. They don't know anything about you.
Mm-hmm.
So almost what I feel like I'm doing with this conversation around job titles and roles and responsibilities is almost framing how I'm going to get to this position where they go, it's Richard. He's brilliant at A, B, C, D, and E, right? Because I've used the job title and the responsibilities to go on this journey with them to show them that I'm capable. I understand the domain. I've got those skills. And then, as you said, it's an ongoing thing. But hopefully, I'm trying to get to the point where they're just like, well, it's Richard. It's not
Yeah.
Richard the test engineer or Richard the senior test engineer or Richard the senior super duper quality architect, advocate, automator, right? It's Richard. And
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately where I'm always trying to get to. And unfortunately, the starting point is your job title. But I would say for me, I wouldn't be put off by the job title. So just that I've repeated that, but the original question, I wouldn't be put off. But as soon as I'm in, I'm definitely wanting that early conversation about what I'm expected to do, how I'm being sold, as you said, how I'm being put forward to the team or in a consultancy, how you're being pitched. And then I might disagree I might think that doesn't align with the title you've given me, but I probably wouldn't kick up enough there to change the title. I think because again, changing a title can be really simple if you're a 10-person company, right? If you're several hundred and 20 other people share your job title, it's going to be hard to get that job title changed. But again, the clear expectations, having them documented, as you said, making sure that conversation has been had. And one thing I do prefer to do as well, because I'm a consultant at the moment, is I like to introduce myself into the team by defining some of the things that I'm here to do and to set that from the off. So it's not just, hey, Richard, the test engineer's joined. It's, hey, Richard, the test engineer, he has these skills and he's here to help us with A, B, and C. So that's clear and being communicated to everybody at the beginning. So almost now I'm not being judged for being the test engineer. I'm being judged for the things that have been defined as why I'm here on this project and what I'm aiming to try and improve.
Yeah.
Without that, you're just a test engineer.
Right. Well, this is the thing, you see, because there's this concept of job crafting, which is
Yeah.
around trying to shape the role that you are going to be taking on. And I think this plays into that because it can be so debilitating being badly positioned.
Oh,
And I think people who have a lot of experience, you'll hear people with a lot of experience say the job title doesn't matter. And that is because of what Richard just described. So there comes a point where your reputation will precede you. And for those people, the job title doesn't matter. Or there's a situation where your competence reaches a certain level of sophistication where you don't really care. You as an individual don't care what the job title is because you will be able to just navigate that situation and have the impact that your
that's a good
teammates and
point.
the companies need, regardless of what the job title is. But for the rest of us who may not be in that situation, the job title is indeed crucial. It's not that those people are wrong. It's more around, well, in what context is your advice not helpful? And if you don't have that level of work history, competence, brand, the job title is important because that's the first thing that people will start to just latch onto subconsciously. They're not evil individuals. It's very human. That's what we do. We pattern match. So the last test engineer that you worked with did A, B, and C. Your definition of a test engineer is that I do 1, 2, and 3 and alpha, beta, gamma. These are not the same, but they're going to be expecting A, B, C. And the sooner and quicker you can find that gap, the better. And it's not being about a word police. I'll link to a really good LinkedIn post from Keith Klein. Keith is one of my favorite people to talk to, listen to about these kind of topics, because he's just got a very clear and forthright position about these things. And it's not about being a word police. Just about meeting people where they're at. Just understand, just in your head be like, oh, well, that means something different to me. Let me just understand what they mean by the term. Once they understand, then you can adjust, because you're the only person that you can control. Then you adjust how you communicate appropriately so that you can have the impact and the influence that you need. That's what I would say.
And I think you're right. Like, my angle there was coming from a, point of experience, right? But I think a simple way of doing that is to ask your manager to do that positioning. I think anyone can just ask for that, as in, can you position me on this? It's almost like I said, the introduction. But if you don't feel comfortable enough positioning yourself, make sure someone does position you in a way, as you said, that is good. The other thing that came to my mind,
make sure they do it though. That's what I said. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, they have to.
That is what I was talking about before. You can have those conversations with your manager, and you think you've had the conversation, but it's not been clear to them that they need to go and do some legwork. I call it air cover. They need to give you some. Do you know what I mean? Set some expectations with the people that you're going to be working with, for sure.
Absolutely. That could be a message in Slack, could be an email, could be like you might, a consultancy, we have profiles, it could be on your profile. It's got to be somewhere where other people can see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing was, and I'm going to try to not merge two topics here, right? But you mentioned positioning a lot. I think there might be a word that you might know, but like when you're unaware how you've been positioned. So you're almost you feel that you've been positioned, or you feel you've positioned yourself, but there's a whole separate conversation that you're not involved in. And in that conversation, you're Richard the test engineer, because that's what your profile page says, or your contract says, or whatever it is. And they're not seeing it, which ties me back into my other thing is when I've heard this a lot when you say, I found this bug and I found it because I'm a great tester. Right? Or, we talk about ourselves from the role perspective. Sometimes on a team, it's like, of course I automated that. I'm a fantastic automation engineer. And it's like, well, actually, no, you automated that really well because you know how to break down tests, you know how to design oracles, you know how to do this. So, and we've mentioned this in the past around CVs, and just to stay on and not go off tangent, right? But we often talk about the titles or sometimes the skills, but less so about the impact. And I think if you call out your impact that you've had, it's often quicker. The transition from Vernon, the test engineer, to Vernon becomes a lot quicker because you've been able to show that value.
So I just quickly looked. So the book that influenced me the most when it came to this concept of positioning is called Awesome Positioning. Obviously Awesome by April Dunford. So I was just scrambling to get the definition. And according to our good friend, perplexity.ai, not a sponsored post, it's defined as the act of deliberately defining how you are the best at something that a defined market cares a lot about.
Okay.
Now, I'm hoping that you can see why I'm so excited about sales and marketing and all the rest of it when it comes to software testing, because, and this could be a nice segue into the next question, actually, Rich.
Sure.
Because that is what I think you were just talking about. You're talking about what is it that I am best at? Not what is it that a test engineer is best at in a team. What am I, the individual Vernon or the individual Rich, best at?
Yep.
In relation to something that the market, and in this case, the market is your line manager, their line manager, your immediate teammates, your peers. That's your market. What are you the best at in terms of things that they care about? And how can I describe that as succinctly as possible? And that is why I think these topics, when it comes to sales and when you start to think about it, you're like, wow, that does actually relate to my job.
Yep.
How I position myself. I am a service provider in this company. The service I provide is what? And who cares about this service? And what is the transformation that results when I deliver this service, what is the impact of that transformation for the people who care about it, and so on and so on and so on. So,
And are you delivering the service that the other people think was needed? Or
exactly,
have you come in to deliver a completely different service? And
exactly.
they're like, why is this person there? We don't need that service. We needed this
Don't need
service.
it. Don't need it.
But
Do you
yeah, they
want
may
that?
not have been involved in the hiring process or anything else.
Nope.
So it's like, again, that is another good aspect here. Like you said, finding out what the people want from you as opposed to
Yeah.
what you can bring and then merging the two together. Yeah, absolutely.
And that
like
next
it.
question, it seems to be directed at you. So I'm
Why
going to read
me?
it out to you.
my whole career could hang on the answer to this question. It's like, does Richard know anything about anything here? Go
Just
on.
to shout out to the people in Slalom who might be listening, Richard is absolutely fantastic and knows a lot of things about a lot of things. So here's the question.
This is a big question.
When people ask you what your job is or what testing is, what do you tell them? And has that changed over the years?
So, welcome to my 2-hour-long talk on the history of testing. Right. So, what my job is, so I'm fortunate to be in a place that does have a very clearly defined quality engineering in a part of the company that is very clearly defined. In another part of the company, it's not so well defined. And then when we go into the consultants, it's almost not defined at all in some cases.
Okay.
In some projects, it very clearly is. But being a consultancy, it's often they want a flavor of what I can do and not always the whole, quality engineer, let's say. They might want the automation side of me. They might want the process side of me. So I think when I say what my job is, like, I'm a consultant within quality engineering. Like my official job title is a senior architect within quality engineering. But I think here architect is being used in a way to show that I can build from the ground up. I can architect an approach to quality engineering. I can build an approach that delivers that. And I can also do all the things underneath it. So I talk about Bloom's taxonomy a lot when it comes to teaching and the kind of the scale of going from being able to define something to being able to actually create it. It's kind of how I view some of those titles. So yeah, my job is to basically help enable teams to deliver better quality right now, kind of through quality engineering.
Okay.
Without going into a wealth of what the hell quality engineering is, right? It's trying to improve quality. And obviously there's so many things that impact quality, right? People, the way we code, PRs, branch strategy, automation strategy, testing strategy, pipelines. There's loads, right? Now, the next question is what testing is. Now, that's obviously a lot easier question to answer, right? For me, testing is, experiment or exploring a product to gather information about it. That's for me what testing is. Explore a system using various different techniques to gather information, which then can be used to answer the questions of does it do what it's meant to do? Is it the right product? Is it high enough quality? Is it undesirable behavior? For me, it's about gathering information. And that's kind of where it stops. After that, you branch into other aspects of software delivery, like how we use this information, comparing that to stories, acceptance criteria, stakeholders. We start to bring in a lot of other skills. So what do I tell them? I kind of just said at the start. So what do I tell people? I said it's more I have the skills to help you improve your overall quality through a whole list of different skills. But I do tell them my job here is to help you deliver higher quality software. And I can predominantly do that through my expertise in testing, but also I'm enough generalist in technology and other aspects of software to help you. But the last bit, like this is the hardest bit, right? But I actually had a conversation with Ben Fellows recently, and he messaged me and asked for a chat just to see where the market was at. And it kind of ties to this question. And funny enough, Vernon, we ended up talking about positioning. So we were talking about where to put his company and asking the question of how it's changed over the years. My early job
It really
was
is
just...
going to take 2 hours.
Yeah, well, I'll try and do it quickly, right? My early job was a QA.
You take your time.
I was a QA, right? Quality assurance analyst, I think was officially what my title was. And there, my job was to be a gatekeeper. My job was to test and gather information, but then I was the person who said yes or no. I was the person that said, you said this in the last pod, you shall not pass, right?
Yeah.
So
you shall not pass.
Exactly. That was my job there. I was QA. I was the gatekeeper. I was in the team of gatekeepers.
Yeah.
And we were the ones saying, you know what? No, it's not good enough. I've read the story. I know the prop. I know everything. You know, this ain't going past there. Go off and fix it and bring it back to me. Then I moved more into the tester space and I started improving my skills on gathering that information. So I was less concerned about being the gatekeeper and I was more concerned about how can I get deeper, richer information about this product and how can I do it quicker? How can I get it quicker so we can move quicker? And
Mm-hmm.
that led me into automation, which was like, well, I could do it quicker if I automate a lot of
Mm.
this. I'll get that information quicker. And there's lots of skills out there to start gathering that information.
Yep.
And that's where I focused a lot of my time and energy. And then I realized, well, I can get all this information, but no one's bloody listening to me. So
Right.
I've
Yep.
got all this stuff now, but I'm still being ignored and I'm still being overruled. So then I started merging more into leadership style roles or trying to have more of an influence. And then we started calling that quality engineering. So then now I'm in this space now where I'm like, I want to help you. But we're all here to deliver quality software to our customers or
Mm-hmm.
impactful software that's going to help people improve their lives or make businesses money. Obviously, that's a big part of it, right? But I'm here to help you produce software that matters and
Mm-hmm.
is useful and is high quality, which, as anyone who reads Micah Brinkoff's post recently, we all seem to be failing miserably at this. Quality of software is plummeting. But
Is enshittification everywhere.
yeah, so has it changed over the years? Absolutely, because now I am still gathering information. Actually, I've missed a very key distinction out. My
Okay.
information that I used to gather was predominantly about the app under test. Now I'm gathering a lot more information about the way we work, the way we write code, the way we write stories, the way we ship it, our strategy for shipping it, our strategy for our users using it. So I'm still gathering information, but
Mm.
now it's more from a overarching. The word quality gets kind of blurred at this point, right? But to help us build a better product, and not just by making the product better, but as in the actual app, as in from a it does what we said we want it to do. How can I influence how we make it do what customers want? How can I make it so the devs write code in one go instead of this back and forth between another developer or tester or PO or whoever? How can we reduce this back and forth so that we build things ideally right quicker? How can we
Mm-hmm.
automate stuff to get information quicker? And
Mm-hmm.
so forth and so forth. So I would say the role has gone from testing a single pillar in the software development lifecycle to testing all these pillars in a line. And then one subtle difference I would say is I've also now gone further into going, what pillars do we actually have? Because not every team's the same. We call it context, right? But what my first starting point is how does this team actually look and work? And once I know that, then I can start applying the information gathering, the critiquing, the suggestions, improvements, and a whole host of tools in my tool belt to go about how to do that. And we don't have the 2 hours, so I'm not going to go into all the tools in the tool belt, right? But that's kind of where it's gone from. It's gone from being the guard at the end of one of these pillars to say no, to gathering information across all of them to help the team. I'm going to stop now.
That was very cool. So you reminded me of some stuff that I've also been talking about. It feels like a lot, particularly in the last few years. There's this 4-step process that I've observed people in our line of work go through, and you literally described it. First one is you are a tester, and I'm interacting with the products in front of me. My focus is bugs. I am after bugs. And then before too long, and you literally did this, you say to yourself, you know, this would be easier if I
Yeah.
insert whatever. This would be easier if I didn't have to do manual testing all day long. So I'm going to go learn this tool. This would be easier if I had a different environment, which I could completely control instead of I'm in this swamp with all the other teams who are just throwing stuff in there willy-nilly, and so on and so on and so on. And then you get to a point where you say, do you know what? It'd be easier if I could just prevent some of these bugs from occurring in the first place. That'd just be easier. Instead of trying to find all these things and learn all these tools and then build all my own tools, can we just stop some of these problems from happening? And that is very much leadership at the other end, but it can still be leadership at the other end. So I'm glad you brought that up. That aspect of it is that leadership is more than a specific role. It can be that. It can be, back to the positioning thing. You can be positioned with a certain level of leadership expectations, but you can assume them as well. You can
Yeah.
take them on, be that person, say, I'm going to be responsible for making this change. But the thing I wanted to come back to was the question. So the question was, when people ask you what your job is or what testing is, what do you tell them? It's all, the implication there is that, is there, so it sounds like you answered the question for you and like your job in the past, your job as it stands currently. Do you think that there is a difference? It loops really back to the first question as well. Do you think there's a difference in how the market define those things?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
here's
Yeah.
another way to put it. So how often have you gone into because you're at a consultancy, so I imagine you're
Yeah.
still in effect having job interviews, even though you've got a job.
Yeah, you
Like,
do.
has it?
Yeah.
Yeah, has it? How often does it happen where you go into one of these conversations with a prospective client, and the thing you're talking about, they're like, "What? I just need someone to just." We've got a pile of. I'm just going to go for the obvious one. We've got a pile of test cases. I just need someone to just execute those, please. What are you talking about? Context and tools and helping the quality and helping us ship fast. What are you talking? The test cases are here, Sunbeam. I need you to go and execute them.
Absolutely. I'm in a similar context now. And it almost goes back to what we're saying about kind of the expectations and the positioning, right? So
Mm,
sometimes they feel like they've made that very clear, and
mm,
they almost feel stuck that this is what we want. We've come to a consultancy,
mhm.
therefore, can you provide me this exact position shaped person, right?
Right, yeah.
And
We want a
you
square shaped tester.
yeah,
You are an oblong.
you get
What are you
in
doing here?
there, but as we always said, right, that like once you're there and you go, okay, I know, and it's happening now. I know exactly what you want me to do, and I can just sit down and do that. But I don't think it's going to help you. So that's
This is
the
Dale again.
but that's a level thing, though, I would say, in that if you're not experienced enough, number one, you would never make the observation I made because you
Hmm.
don't have the skill set or the
Hmm.
experiences to make that observation. You will
Yep.
almost be in line to say what you're suggesting is correct, or you might have a very small tweak. But once you've been in the game a lot, and it's almost difficult at consulting because sometimes you're put into positions that you're far too experienced for, but
Yeah.
that's the market at the time, and at a
That's it.
consultancy, you are the product, right?
Billable,
So,
baby. You gotta be
yeah,
billable.
but sometimes you end up in a position, and I don't know the exact skill sets, but you almost get an immediate sense that it can be reshaped. The position can be slightly reshaped with not a
There's
lot of
some
effort.
there's some wiggle room. There's
Well,
some you
you
can
get a
read
cue
you can
sometimes that,
yeah.
yeah, and I don't know exactly where it comes from, but maybe the person explaining it to you, you're kind of like, I don't think you really understand what you're talking about. I think you've
Okay.
read a book and you think this is how we do it, or
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but have you all considered B? So again, though, being a consultant, I like to put that into the conversation quite early on.
Mm,
Like in that conversation where someone says, "Here's what you're going to go off you go and do it." I'm not just going to say yes. I'm not immediately going to argue with them, but I'm going to say, "Can you give me a little bit more reason as to why I'm doing this? How do I know I'm succeeding at this? What does
mhm.
good look like for you?" And in those conversations, you usually get a few little snippets of the wider problem. And then as a consultant, then I can try and lead and influence. Say, actually, I can do what you're asking, but if you considered A might actually help us with this problem as well. And do you have that problem? Oh yeah, we do. Okay, well, I think it might be sensible to maybe pivot a little bit. And sometimes in a consultancy, this gets done early on, right? It gets done even before I'm there, but not
Mhm.
always the case. So again, a little bit to go back to job crafting. It's
Mm.
almost a little bit of that sometimes, where you can, start to craft your job a little bit more to have a bigger impact. But yeah, I've gone off train with thought now.
Well, it sounded coherent to me, I'll have to say. You mentioned at the start of this answer you were giving out, you mentioned that, well, what it sounded like you were saying is, and I've seen this, you go into a situation, a consulting situation or a permanent job situation, it doesn't really matter, where people say that, so you're the expert in the situation, right? People say that they want A, but you can see that they need B.
Mhm.
And that, I think that's a very interesting phenomenon that I think a lot of us find ourselves in. And I think, fully enough, Emily is also a consultant. So she's in the same
Yep.
situation that you are in all the time, where you're asking me for this thing, but the root cause is over here. I personally have been in tons of situations where I'm asked to go into a job and they're saying, hey, the problem is testing. Like, testing is taking too long.
Yeah.
The testers are not documenting what they are doing. So can you go in and help with that? I think I've got one particular scenario in mind. Shout out to you, Faris, and still. Where you get told that and you go, okay, cool, and then you go in and you do your own little bit of recon, and it turns out there isn't anything wrong with the testing. The problem is elsewhere in the system. There's a system of work occurring, and once you get a feeling for what that system of work is, you start to say, oh, there are these other things occurring within the system, and they are actually, that's having a bigger impact than any issues with the testing. And by the way, there aren't any issues with the testing. The testing that's going on right now is really good in the context that
Yeah.
it's in.
Yeah.
No, the testing is taking too long is because you haven't created enough space in the system for people to attack that problem. People aren't documenting what they're doing. They are documenting what they're doing. You are expecting test cases. They have exploratory test notes. They are invisible as far as you're concerned. It's like going to France and speaking English. It's like you are speaking, but
Yeah.
people will say, "What you're not making any sense. Speak French."
And you're giving them like 2 days to do all
Yeah,
those things. Like
exactly.
it's miraculous they're even able to do that level of good testing in the first place, and
Yeah.
even document the slightest, because you're not giving them the frame to do it. But yeah, I would say,
I just wanted to ask you another quick angle on the
okay,
question, but
go on then.
it's a bit of a
No,
tangent.
go for it. Go for it.
Well, it got me thinking. There's a part where it says, "What do you tell them?" And it's like, so do you give, depending on who's asking, do you give different answers to that question, or
Yeah.
do you give the same answer all the time?
Again, I think it's outside of being in a context, probably the same answer every time.
Mm.
Once I'm in that context, and when I like, so in a team, so if I was like on a generic interview for a role, I'd probably
Mm-hmm.
give the same answer,
That you
most of the
gave to the
time,
last.
slightly, yeah, slightly framed around what I know about the company, right? But I don't know enough to start critiquing the way they work and stuff, right? Or talking about weaving it into everything. But once
Mm.
I'm in a context and I can learn a little bit more about it, and that's been a case recently on a project, and we mentioned this in previous pods. I literally turn into, I don't know, like a super learner in the first 3 days of a project, and I
Hyperfocus.
consume as much as possible, and I just consume. I don't start trying to make sense of it. So in my training, I just call it context gathering, right? But I just consume as much as possible. I
Deep
talk to
immersion.
people,
You're just
yeah,
in there.
deep immersion, and I try and do this. So again, consulting projects vary, right? But if it's a short-lived thing, you're not going to have a lot of time. But I
Mm-hmm.
found one day is not enough, so I try and do 3. And I'm doing this whilst at least also trying to show some value,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I've been brought in for a reason, right?
Yeah.
But then for me, the next level is the testability. So that's when I can start tweaking my answer. So now I've got enough about their context, I can start saying, well, it's quite hard to test here. Testability being my ability to test. It's like my ability to test here is kind of hard because of A, B, and C, but also really easy because of this A, B, and C. And now I can start to talk to them as if I've been there for years, because I know enough to frame it in their language and their context that I rapidly learned in those 3 days. Or not it's gonna say Scarleton, I only know 3 days worth, right? So I'm not gonna start ripping them apart and
You
being
are
like,
trash. Who
yeah, this
decided
is
to use microservices over here?
like exactly, this has always been this way. Like, how have you always worked this way? You're all terrible. Every single one of you. Like, can't do that. But I can say I've observed, this in the last 3 days. Is that standard here? Is that how it always is? I observe this. Is that the norm? Is that how, I can frame it in that way and to say that I'm almost helping them get to their conclusion by me saying, I observed A, and then clarify it with them to say, is that the norm? And if they say no, then obviously I stop what I'm saying. If they're sat there nodding, I know that my early observation and interpretation is probably correct. And that's enough to frame the next bit where I say, so I actually think testing is this. I actually think quality is this. And I can use proper examples that they're going to relate to because I've had that 3 days of rapid learning. And I had that immediate nod within the conversation where they acknowledged my observation enough to me to go, I can move forward with that observation. That's a genuine observation that actually is going to be a pivot point for me to engage with this person. Whereas again, if they immediately shut that observation down, I'd move on to a different one. But most of the time within practice, you start to really spot the obvious things. And one of my colleagues in the last one was recently, he's like, Richard, how the hell have you fully understood this context in 4 days? Like it makes no sense. And I'm like, and I'm not saying this isn't like I'm amazing. It's like I can't operate. I can't operate without it because I can't operate without it because I can't frame what I'm doing without knowing it. And it's almost the conversation. So the same person stopped using the term best practices when I originally joined the company. I gave a talk and I said, there's no such thing as best practices, only good practice in context. And he was like, he stopped using the term best practice now. But without that observation and that context gathering, I would just be spitting out best practices. Whereas that makes no sense to me. That doesn't fit with my ethos of the world and how I view software. It's like, actually, no, I've learned this much, which gives me enough to frame these practices and make them sound good or prove they are good because I've got enough. So yeah, I absolutely always, once I'm on the ground, I change it and I almost start doing the job crafting. I almost immediately start doing the leadership and I start trying to influence conversations to get sometimes to put my own points across, but a lot of it is conversations to get them to almost tell me what's wrong. It's almost a bit like therapy.
When I do it, I've been told multiple times at the end of the conversation, people are like, thanks. Like, no, I haven't been able to, thanks for listening. Like, no, I've never been able to get that off my chest. That was like a therapy session.
Yeah, exactly that.
All these kind of feedbacks, because you're just giving people the space to get the ideas out. And it's not, again, it's not completely altruistic. Like we are doing it to help them, but it also helps us. And if you can get those people with the context, I like using the phrase the people who know where the bodies are buried and might even be responsible for putting those bodies in the ground themselves. If you can get them to articulate what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, what do they want help with, what are they trying to achieve, what are the things they're not that are on the back burner for now, and why, and all this kind of stuff. It really gives you a good means to decide what you're going to do next. So
There's
I
one more.
I don't know how you wrap all of that up into an answer.
I was going to say, I don't know, but there's one more thing that does jump to mind, which is, and it's slightly related to the consultancy, and you mentioned Emily being in consultancy. And it almost might make sense in your career as a whole, right? And tie it back to this job title thing as well, right? I'm here, I've been positioned in this way, which means there's an expectation for me to do this, right? And it's the same for me when I join consultancies. Even though we've just mentioned I usually observe a lot, and I almost, not always, but a lot of the time, you're like, this is not going to lead into a. That's not right. What's the best way of saying it? Like, I can invest my energy in this, what you're describing, and I'm going to get to here, right? But I've observed enough to get us to here, right? And I think if we tweak my time here with you, we can get to here. But what we also do at the same time is I am going to do what you've asked me to do. I'm not going to do what you've said, right?
It's really important to say that.
Yeah, because there's an expectation that in their mind, I'm just a piece of the puzzle that they've already solved, right?
Correct.
So they're viewing me, I'm here.
this puzzle is different than you think.
Exactly. So
And that,
they've got a Richard shaped piece, right? And
yeah,
they've basically painted my face onto that piece, and they put me into their puzzle.
they've gone,
And
awesome.
the rest of the journey is going to continue on and be
They're over
amazing.
here now. Yeah, they're over here dealing with the rest of the
Exactly.
puzzle as it looks to them at
So
that
if I
moment.
come in and say, I ain't doing that, I think you should do this.
They're like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Their whole plan in their head has just gone poof.
You've just
Like,
grenade.
exactly. Whereas
It's
instead, I say, I am definitely going to do what you've asked. However, I would also like a separate stream of work over here,
mhm.
which is going to kind of start to shape the next pieces of the puzzle.
It's the consulting equivalent of yes and.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Mm,
However, there has been the odd occasion where it's like doing this makes no sense. Like this is completely going to get us absolutely nowhere. And
yeah,
in that case, you do what we've just described, and what we've
yep.
just described works 99% of the time, and people go, "Oh yeah, that kind of sounds good. Kind of makes sense. Let's formulate a plan where we can do it piecemeal and not disrupt the current plan too much." But sometimes you
Hmm.
get no, like you just simply
Yeah.
get no. I need you to do
Hmm.
this. And it
Hmm.
almost takes me back to the, when we jokingly tell people just to quit their jobs, right? In that situation, it's like, are you in a position yourself right now, mentally, in the job, in work, everything else, to just sit down and do work you do not believe is going to bring value? If you are,
Hmm.
and you know that's going to provide what you need, bills paid, etc., job security, whatever else it is, then do it.
Hmm.
If you're like, I'm going to get so irritated every day that I'm doing this work that I think is wrong and I don't believe in, that's when you should ideally talk to somebody else and say, I'm not the right consultant for this project.
Hmm.
And a bit like what Linda we said in our recent episode about PeersCon from Linda, when she said, I can do this work for you, but it's not going to be the best result. I think the only slight difference I'm saying here is thinking of yourself first. Like, I am not going
Hmm.
to enjoy doing this work. This is going to impact the other aspects of my life. I'm going to be irritable, I'm going to be annoyed, and I'm not going to enjoy going to work. That's when it's worth the question of, you know what, maybe a different consultant would be better here who doesn't have those other opinions and experiences that I've got, and they can just sit down and do it. But again, that's a very, very rare edge case. Usually, with the right techniques, you can get to a point of, common ground, and maybe suggesting a small experiment will be enough to
It's
satisfy your itch to say needs to be a little bit different.
I actually don't think it's rare. I don't think it's rare. I think it happens often enough that it's important to call it out,
Okay.
because and what you don't want to have happen is that you got to pick your battles. You got to figure out, is this a hill worth dying on? Do I want to win this battle and lose the war? So if you can be belligerent, you can be extremely belligerent. What does that get you? Does that really help?
Yeah.
But I feel like we've drifted miles away from the bloody question.
I
Do
don't
you,
think so. I think it's
you feel like it feels like there is no way that you found to just succinctly answer this question in a one line? I don't think I can right now. I think
I
it's a great question. I think there's so many it depends, and
I think
well,
the other
you know,
question is, right, let me attempt to wrap it up, because I'm being reminded of a conversation I had with Lee Rathbone, right? And job titles in our industry have stigma associated with them. That ain't never going to go away, right? That's there, that exists, right? Job titles, you can then go in and you can discuss with the business and the team, and you can position yourself as we just discussed, right, in a certain way, and that can
mhm,
help with the job crafting in your career journey that we spoke about at the start of the pod.
mhm,
When it comes to that second question, which I just joked would take 2 hours to answer, right? Context is so important. And the conversation I've been reminded of with Lee is, we have people over here, waterfall still, release once a year, right?
loads of
Whatever. Yeah, loads of them. Yeah. Yeah. And then when we get to this side, we've got, super duper ultra agile with a lowercase a, releasing 1,000 times a day. Devs are writing all the unit tests. I'm there more as a quality, again, I'm about to say a role, which proves my point. I'm there as a quality coach or whatever, helping them. And we have zero bug policy and all these shiny, fun things, right? And then we have everyone in between. And everyone in between is on a completely different journey of software and software development. So I can't just go into any of them and say, I'm a test engineer, I'm a quality engineer, I'm a this, I'm a that, because we don't know what scale that they're on and what that means to them. So therefore, we have to have the conversations we've just been discussing. And as a consultant, that happens to me a lot more, right? Because I'm context switching a lot. If you're in a team, you probably don't have to do that as frequently. If you're in a product team, you'll probably do it as your team matures and you make fundamental shifts. You might have to revisit it, and you don't have to practice those skills as much.
I think where it will affect, I think where it does become important, if you're, you can be in a role that spans, chunks of the business rather than a specific team. So you may have people responsibilities, or in terms of, like, technical scope is quite broad. And I think in those situations, that approach is extremely helpful. That's the kind of approach that I use in my current role. It's a company with a broad scope, and so having those kind of conversations is very useful indeed.
And then the final piece of like trying to stitch it all together is like getting very good at not saying I'm a test engineer, I'm a quality engineer all the time. Actually, as in, oh, I've just done all this amazing work because I'm a quality engineer. It's like actually you get really good at reflecting on what it was you did that made that go so well. What was the skills? Because it might be a skill that was never listed under quality engineer in your previous job. That skill was not on the spec. But here, you've developed it for reasons A, B, and C, working with other people, the context changing. So now your own expectations of a quality engineer is shifted, and you have to really pay attention to those shifts, not the title, because then you're going to continue to undersell yourself. You're going to continue to poorly position yourself. So you also have to get good at that. And I think that's kind of the final piece of that question of what do you tell them? What is it? And it will change as you go on your own career journey. The title in some contexts will stay the same, but the skills you're going to pull out of that tool belt, the experiences you're going to call upon, they're different.
Yeah, it comes back to that sales concept of knowing what is the impact that I can have and for who, and being able to grab and notice and collect as many instances where you have that impact for people, so that as you're, having different conversations inside or outside of your current business, you can speak much more powerfully and specifically to those impacts. Said, well, in this situation, I took this action and it had this impact for my immediate teammates and the business. Graphs went in the right direction with the right shape, or time reduced or expanded in the right way, etc., etc., etc. And the great thing is the more you practice having that conversation, the better you get at making those points and articulating yourself in a way that doesn't lose people. Because you can lose people if they're talking to you about test engineering and you're talking about something else. You can lose people. So you need to be able to take people on that journey with you and say, and communicate that in this role, these are the actions that you take and these are the impacts that they have. And this is how all of that still serves the goals that they want. Because to loop back to the glue work situation, those expectations are real. People are going to be making decisions based on those expectations they have about you and your career. And so you need to be able to continually tie that narrative back to, I did this stuff, here's how it helped, here's how that still met the expectations that you had for me in this role.
And that really crucial bit there is that I did this stuff, that reflecting, continuous reflection on what it was that you did, so you can pick out that important thing. You didn't do that thing because you're a test engineer. You did it because it's a skill you have, an observation you made, and you thought that's going to have an impact. And you need to remember that when it comes to these conversations in the future. And without it, you lose the foundation to form those arguments or those stances or the leverage to try and shape that position. You don't have it, so you have to get really good at that as well. Sweet.
I am wanting to be respectful of
absolutely
times, the listeners' times, because we've been going on and it's been an hour in this recording. We've only done 2 bloody questions. He has now sorted out our schedule for the next 2-3 years. So thank you very much for that, Emily. This is now called the Vernon Richard Emily Show.
Well, yeah, I've got a call for action though. If like that question number 2, like I would love to see people answer that. If you feel like you need some info, some help to post your next LinkedIn post or next blog post, answer that question, because that is a fantastic question. It maybe should be the title for future keynote or talk by somebody, because it's such a great question. And yeah, if there's any topics you want to ask,
challenge and create some content around this, that would be great.
Deliberate practice, answer this question. So yeah, any other topics, questions, please comment below. Any points you want to call out, any double down, any experiences, whatever it is. Like, we have this pod so we can trigger conversations and continue the conversations in the comments, in the chats, etc. And if you've not subscribed, please subscribe.
I'm going to say, on the topic of comments, please comment, like and subscribe. Share this with your family, your friends. The more subscribers we get, the better for us, the more people we can reach, and we would really appreciate it. And it's free. Where else can you help people for free so easily?
Absolutely. Right. Enjoy your days, evenings, whatever time of day you're listening to this.
Indeed.
And see you next time.
Thanks for hanging out with us. See ya.